Hello, everybody. I guess we'll go ahead and start. I'm Diana Haberkamp. I'm with Neurofibromatosis Midwest. I want to welcome you all. Thank you all for coming. We put this together in conjunction with NF Northeast and Texas NF. We got Cindy and Karen on here. They're going to wave. We're happy to bring this to you. In case you're not aware, we're all regional organizations for NF. We work in our area, our specific areas. We have similar missions where we do support research, but we also believe in focusing on support and education. And we do a lot of the same things for that, including outreach, answering questions, mentoring. I think we all have scholarships. We all support camps. We work with our clinics to develop our clinics. So we're happy to come together and bring this to you. Today, if you have a question, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. And I think there is a way to raise your hand if you want to speak. We should be hopefully broadcasting on Facebook, and we'll try to look there for your questions in our NF Midwest group currently. So we'll look for questions there. And I want to go ahead and, I also want to tell you that we also really want to share experiences. I think that's a good idea when we have time to share experiences, but let's try to keep it brief because we only have, trying to keep this to an hour. So I want to go ahead and introduce Ellyce Anapolsky from Legal Counsel for Health Justice in Chicago. She works out of Chicago, and she specializes in Social Security disability. She's a senior attorney there. Now I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you.
Okay.
But I'll let you introduce yourself while I bring up your screen and while you're doing that, okay?
Okay, that's fine. So I work for a nonprofit. We do legal services and all kinds of different ones. I've been there about 15 years. And so my specialty is Social Security disability and SSI. You'll have a coworker of mine, I think next week or so, that's going to talk about Medicare and Medicaid. So we have a PowerPoint.
Okay. Everybody see that?
And if you go to the first page, yeah. So if everybody looks, my email address is on that first page, Ellyce@legalcounsel.org. Something got left off of there. I apologize for that. My typing is not so good apparently. But you can just email me questions if you have questions. There were a bunch of questions that people had ahead of time that I answered, and I think the answers to those are in the chat room, right, Diana?
Yes, we did put in the chat. If you look at the chat, we put Ellyce's slideshow, and we also put the questions that she already answered.
Right.
But we also try to cover those today.
But we'll try to cover some of that anyhow. It's going to be covered in the slideshow. So we can go forward. Advance, is that what you? Yeah. So we're going to talk about the benefits first. Qualifying for Social Security retirement, supplemental security income, security disability. Whoops, go back one. You went.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
So I have to be careful what I click. I have to be careful what I click here because I'm clicking things and it's messing you up. There you go.
No, you need to go back one.
All right, sorry. Okay. Is that it? All right.
So I'm going to talk about public benefits, and then I'm going to talk about the financial elements. So there's ABLE account, special needs trust to protect assets. Okay. What I'm not going to talk about is the healthcare piece, which is and food stamps and housing assistance, but I'll be talking about benefits. So you can go advance. So I have a slide that kind of shows an overview of how this all fits together. It kind of helps me figure out where I am when I'm talking about things. So Mike, is there somebody named Mike on the call they're drawing on my screen? So I don't know if they're doing that to everybody, but
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, okay. Is it doing it on yours too?
Yeah.
I'm seeing
a lot on mine.
Oh, okay. Well, anyhow, it doesn't matter. I can see through it. But if you want to go ahead, you want to advance one, Diana?
Yeah.
So here's basically how it all kind of fits together. There are federal benefits and there are state benefits. I really specialize in federal benefits. And there's cash, there's medical, and then there's some other kinds of benefits. For federal benefits, there's ticket to work. So if you're on benefits and want to work, there's some assistance to you through the Ticket to Work program. There's work incentives. We're going to talk a little bit about those. And then there's subsidized housing that are all federal. And state have their own kind of benefits, TANF, general assistance, unemployment, Medicaid, home health care, food stamps, and subsidized housing also. So it's kind of a nice way to know where you are in the system. Advance. So cash benefits, you can get them on an earnings record, and that would be Social Security retirement and Social Security disability income. That means that you've worked enough quarters and worked and got enough earnings in those quarters to get to be qualified to get cash benefits. And then there's cash benefits that you get because you meet the need requirement, and that's supplemental security income. So they're quite different in how they're operated, but they both require a finding of disability that is the same for both, for the two disability programs. Retirement is based on your age. Yeah. So Social Security retirement can be awarded based on your own earnings record, the earnings record of a spouse who's deceased, the earnings record of a divorced spouse to whom you were married to for 10 years or longer. So if you're getting a divorce, you might want to make sure you were married at least 10 years. Some people have gotten a divorce 9 years and 11 months and 1 week, and they still won't get the retirement of their spouse. But if they had waited a few more weeks, they would have gotten benefits on a divorced spouse record. And the other is a parent's earnings record. If you're under 19 and your parent is retired, disabled, or deceased, you will get Social Security retirement on the record of your parent.
Ellyce, how much of a difference could that be then?
Pretty huge. If you're only eligible for SSI because you've never worked, the maximum benefit this year is $794. The maximum benefit under retirement is about $2,600 or $2,900. It keeps changing, but the average is even around $900 or to $1,000, and it also gives you access to Medicare. So it's important to know where you fit in those criteria. So it's important to get found disabled before age 22. It's not a good thing to wait, right?
Well, I learned that the hard way.
Yeah. Okay, so Social Security Administration, when you go in to apply for benefits, they're going to try to figure out what's the best benefit for you, and they're supposed to calculate all these amounts, and they should find the one that gives you the most for your money. And if you don't have much in the way of earnings record, you might get two benefits, which would be SSI and SSA, disability. So if you were making about $300 a month in disability income, SSI would come in and supplement that $300 to bring it up to the $794 plus $20. So it's worth applying for both if you're eligible for both.
Right.
So you know what might be good to do is everybody who's not talking, maybe just to put yourself on mute because there's background noise. Yeah, thank you.
If you don't know how to mute yourself, let us know. Are you ready to go forward or?
Yeah, go forward. Okay. So the eligibility based on a claimant's age is you can take retirement from age 62 and to full retirement age. There'll be a decrease in the amount you get. And then you can actually let it grow to the age of 70. But after 70, the benefit does not get any higher. So you might want to take it then. The amount that you get is based on your earnings record. So you must have at least 40 quarters of coverage. That means that you worked 10 years and that for each quarter, which changes every year, you made enough money to get a quarter of coverage. So if you made $10,000 in a year, you would get 4 quarters of coverage.
So I have a question. I'm going to interrupt really quick since I'm thinking of these things and I've had experience with it, and
Right.
that might be helpful. If you qualify for disability and then you're working and you didn't have that much earnings, the work you're doing is also increasing. Does that increase your
Yeah,
coverage?
Yeah, typically every year in December, you'll get an increase in your base pay, and then it will get increased for the COLAs too. So I'm still working. I'm going to be 75. I have my retirement, and every year because I work, I get a little bit more
Okay.
income. And it kind of depends on how much you were making. If you're making more than you were making before, it will increase. If you were making less than you were making before, it may not increase in the same way.
Okay. I
Okay.
asked because my daughter has gotten some increases and I wasn't sure
Yep.
why. And I think it's because she has work.
That's right.
Yeah.
So as long as she made it a quarter of coverage, there'll be some impact on your payment.
So that's another reason to try and work
Yes.
when you're on disability. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, it depends on what benefit you're on.
Okay.
Okay. So work affects you differently if you're on SSI or SSDI. And I don't know if I have some stuff in that. We'll see if we get to that. Otherwise, we'll do that in the questions. Okay.
Okay. You want me to advance?
Advance, sorry. So who's eligible for SSDI? So you have to meet the non-medical requirements, which we talked about, which was the 40 quarters of coverage. And for disability, you also have to have 10 of those quarters in the last 5 years. So, no, in the last 10 years, you have to work 5 out of the last 10 years. So that's kind of a recency requirement. So if you worked a lot and it was like 30 years ago, you're not going to be eligible for SSDI. Because there's a thing called the date last insured. So again, if you find that you can't work and it's the NF that's causing you the problem, then the sooner you apply, the better off you're going to be. And the other thing is you can always go back to work, and you can maybe work yourself off of benefits and then come back on. So it's really once you get awarded benefits, it acts kind of as a safety net for you that you can kind of move back and forth between benefits and no benefits. So it's important to do that.
So you don't have to requalify?
Well, you may have to. It depends on how long you work.
Okay.
But generally, there's a couple of ways to get in that will speed the process up for you. And if it's within a certain amount of time, it will automatically put you back on benefits. Okay. So there's a lot of arcane rules. Working in Social Security disability there's a book that I think I've put in the question part, but it's the red book. It also might be in my slides, which talk about what you have to think about when you work and you're on disability. So remember, even if you're disabled, if you're making too much money, you're still not going to qualify. So you have to really think about what's going on with you when you make these decisions. And to get it on a parent's record, you have to be over 18. And the best, as I said, to get found disabled before age 22 so that you'll be eligible for your parents' retirement when they retire or become disabled or deceased. Okay, next.
Okay. Did it go?
No.
There we go.
Oh, somebody asked about what the name of that book is. It's called The Red Book. And it's you can just Google Red Book Social Security and it'll come right up. But I have it in the questions too. So you have to meet the requirements again. You must be found disabled. And being found disabled in Social Security requires a 5-step process that we're going to talk about. So one of the things to think about is when you apply is what your onset date is. If you apply soon after you stop working, then the date after you stop working is what you want to have as your onset date. If you wait longer, you can still apply for benefits up to 17 months before your application date and get a year's worth of back benefits if you have an earnings record. Okay, advance. So criteria, you or someone you're related to under SSA rules have earned coverage. To earn coverage, you must have those sufficient number of quarters. If you're young, if you're under 31, the number of quarters is reduced. So you'd have to know, it's different for every age, but you'd only need less quarters, because obviously you're younger and don't have those years. You must meet the citizenship requirements. And so basically, though, as I said, you need 20 quarters of coverage in the last 10 years. So don't wait too long. Advance. The 5-step process is, you're not working. If you're working and making more than an amount called SGA, which we're going to talk about, substantial gainful activity, they're going to deny you immediately. So it's a waste if you're making too much money and working to apply. You have to have a severe condition, and that's really a pretty simple standard. Usually it's whether or not it causes a minimal amount of problems for you. And then there's something called a listing. We know that NF doesn't have a listing, but sometimes the symptoms of NF meet a listing. So it depends on what your symptoms are and how that fits into the listing arguments. Do you have a tumor in your brain that might meet some of the brain listings? Do you have cognitive impairments that might meet some of the cognitive impairments? So it's really going to depend on what your symptoms are. And then if you've had work in the past, they're going to ask you whether or not you can do the work you did before. So you have to be able to say no to that in order to get past that step 4. And that's a place where sometimes people get hung up because they still want to think they can do the work they did before. And often will tell Social Security that oh yeah, I could do my old job. And it's probably not true if it got to the point where you stopped working. And then the last question is, can you do any other kind of work in the economy? Every Social Security claim has a vocational expert that makes those determinations. Their job is to place people in jobs who are disabled. And so they advise Social Security whether there are any jobs that could be done.
Next. This is the area that I see people get, hung up on a lot. I mean, we have people with NF, and I'm sure Karen and Cindy can attest to this, who they just keep working, but it's really, really hard, and they're going to work and they're in pain, they're struggling, and they're really not making, sometimes they're not making much money. And then they're like, well, what do I do? Do I quit and then hope I get disability and risk losing my job? I mean, what would you recommend somebody when they're in that conundrum?
Well, it's a really hard question to answer because there aren't any good answers, right? I mean, if your performance gets so bad that you get fired, then at least you can collect unemployment in the process of getting a disability. But what Social Security is going to ask you, are you looking for a full-time job? And if you're looking for a full-time job, they're going to be reluctant for the 2 different answers that you want to give. On one hand, you're saying you can't work, and on the other, you're saying you can work full-time.
Right.
So usually what we see is that people who are looking for part-time jobs can still get unemployment and still apply for disability.
Okay, because they're going to say unemployment is also asking you if you're looking for a job, so you should be trying to look for something part-time.
Yep.
But if you're working a part-time job and you're in pain and you're just trying to work and you're working a part-time job, that still qualifies as working.
Mm-hmm. It depends on how much you make. If you made less than $13.10 this year, it wouldn't count. Somebody was asking, how do they assess the level of severity? So that's going to be, as I said, most things will meet the criteria for severity. But it has to cause you more than a minimal amount of limitation in your ability to work. And it's a very subjective thing. Okay. So for SSI, remember, this is a needs-based program. It's not based on an earnings record. So it's all based on countable income. And the countable income must be less than the SSI benefit rate, which is $794 for 2021 for an individual and $1191 for a couple. So you're going to say, why the couple? So if in this country that we live in, if you're married, a husband has a legal responsibility to support a wife. So they count the income and assets of everybody in the family. Okay. If 2 people in a family are getting SSI. The most they can get together is 1191, and they usually split it between the two in the couple, okay? So it's less than you would get if you were an individual living alone, or an individual living with somebody else that you're not married to. So, you know, there's some thought to whether or not you're married or divorced or want to get married. If you're on SSI, you may not want to, because you'll lose income just by saying that, you know, just by getting that formality done. The other thing is there's resource limits. So you can only have $2,000 for an individual in cash and investments. That's why towards the end, we're going to talk about special needs and ABLE accounts that might loosen that up for you. And if you're married, it's $3,000 a couple. And if you have more resources than that, you're going to be over-resourced, and they're going to take away your benefit for every month that you're over-resourced. You do have to meet the citizenship requirements and then be determined disabled by those 5-step process. So SSI, it's really important to understand is that you cannot get benefits for any months before you apply. So in order to get a finding, so if you go in and you just apply for SSDI and you didn't bother to apply for SSI, and then you realize that your benefit was going to be less than the 794, then you'd want to then apply for SSI, but you're only going to get it going forward. Whereas if when you go in and apply, you apply for both benefits, they figure out what you're eligible for. Advance. So yes, when you go into the office or you do it over the phone, they will help you figure out whether you can do both claims. And these days, what they're doing is taking both claims and then denying you right away for the one that you're not eligible for. So if you apply for both SSDI and SSI, but you're never going to get SSI, you'll get a denial in the mail. And a lot of people think it's both benefits they've been denied for. So important thing to do is look at the top left-hand corner of your letter. Does it say supplemental security income, or does it say retirement survivors income? Okay, so it's, so Social Security, we should apply for both.
We had a question that came in through Facebook, and I want to ask it now because I'm not sure what, as I'm multitasking, what part this goes to, and you might understand it better. It is, so would that be the same if your child is getting SSI and the parent gets it also? I guess is what they're asking.
Say that again.
They say, so would that be the same if your child is getting SSI and you, the parent, get it?
No, if you and your child are getting it, then you're both eligible. So
I hope that answered the question. The question might have been from earlier, but I think it was from there somewhere.
Okay.
All right. Did you want me to advance?
Basically, what happens is with two people, they can each have countable income of 794. And if they have 0, then they could get the whole benefit. So both of you would get the whole benefit. It's different than a couple. But what would happen is if you're earning money, then they're going to deem some of your money to that child. Since it's SSI, there's no money to deem to the child. But if you were getting $1,000, there would be a few $100s that could be deemed to the child. So if you were getting SSDI, there would be a different way to calculate it, or some other unemployment insurance, some other kind of unearned income. It's going to affect the child's benefit. But if you're just getting SSI, it will not. Okay. Advance. So the 5-step process, we'll just go through them a little bit more thoroughly. So again, working. In Social Security speak, working means that you're making at least this year $1,310, okay? So it's measured by your gross income, not what you take home. And for SGA, for self-employment people, is a completely different animal. And so you need to talk to somebody to find out how to qualify as a self-employed person. And the other thing is you have to expect this disability to last at least 12 months. So, so you could apply for SSDI before you completely stop working, but you have to be working at less than 1310 in order to be even evaluated. Okay. So SSDI is not short-term disability. People call sometimes, they've had a bad surgery, they're not going to be able to work for 6 months and they want to apply for SSDI. Don't bother. You're going to have to be out a year before they'd award benefits. Okay. There's no partial disability. It's just all or nothing. Advance. Severe. Does your impairment or combination of impairments limit your physical or mental ability to do basic work activities? So we're talking about physically walking, standing, sitting, lifting, seeing, hearing, speaking, using judgment, the mental, using judgment, understanding, carrying out and remembering simple instructions, okay? Because they're going to look at both of those things. If your condition is not severe, you are not disabled, and otherwise you go to the next step. There used to be a time when they would deny a lot of people benefits at step 2, but that's kind of gone out of vogue a little bit. You see it, maybe 1 in 100 might, or 1,000 might say that these days. It's a lot less. Advance. The listing of impairments is the list maintained by Social Security, which includes descriptions of conditions considered severe enough to prevent working. There are separate listings for children and for adults, and we're going to talk about children at the end of this. This is really focused mostly on adults. But if your medical conditions meet the requirements of that listing, then you're found disabled. If not, the process continues. And a lot of these listings are a little bit obscure. A lot of the tests that they say you have to meet in order to meet that listing are not used very often anymore. So oftentimes it's hard to get the testing. So
What kind of things are on the listings? Are like cancer?
Blindness, cancer, cognitive impairments, bipolar affective disorders, really the gamut of all the different, there's a bunch of different systems they look at. So it's musculoskeletal, it's genital urinary, it can be seizures. It's just a bunch of different things. And it's actually online. So if you Google listing of impairments, SSA, you will get their listings by system. Advance. So after they figure out your residual functional capacity, if you didn't meet a listing, they're going to look and see what you can do. And then it compares it with the RFC with your prior work first, okay? So to see whether or not you could still do that work. And prior work is anything that was done in the last 15 years.
Wow.
So if you were a security guard, for instance, and you just sat at a monitor, security surveillance, you might be pretty messed up here, because they will generally find, unless you can't do, unless you have some kind of bilateral handling problem, or you're blind, or some other reason, they're going to almost always find that you could do that work.
Even if it's something you did 15 years ago, they're going to go back and say you go.
That.
Wow.
I know. Advance. And then if they can't find that you can do your prior work, they're going to look to see whether you can do any other work. And again, this is a vocational expert whose job it is to place disabled people in jobs, and they're going to say whether there's jobs that you can do. Okay, and they look at what, how long you can sit, how long you can stand, how much you can lift, how much you can push and pull, how much you can, if you can't be in different environments because you have really bad asthma, they're going to look at all kinds of different things. If you have seizures, then they're not going to let you do heights, probably ropes or scaffolding either. So there's all kinds of little things they look at, and they come up to see whether or not there's any work in the country that you can do in significant numbers.
What if you have seizures and you can't drive, or a lot of different things may make it difficult for you to drive? Did they even take that into account to drive to a job?
Not too much. They figure that you can get there somewhere. They're not too generous here.
Okay.
They can add that to a hypo can't drive, but then they would say, well, you could move next door to the job.
Right. Or take an Uber.
Yeah. Take an Uber. Okay, advance.
I think I did.
Oh, I'm sorry. So So applications are made online, by phone, or at the local office. Though due to COVID, office appointments have to be made ahead, and you have to call and get a specific time and date to do that. You have to provide evidence of citizenship, names and addresses of your doctors, hospitals, and treatments received, and the medications you take. They should provide, if you have medical records, it's great to bring it to them, but just let them copy them and you keep them, because any piece of paper that goes to Social Security and stays with Social Security gets lost. That's a rule of thumb.
Oops, I advanced, is that all right?
Go back a little bit just for, yeah, okay. So you're going to get, once you submit this application, you're going to get questionnaires that depend on the nature of your disability to be completed by you or some other family members. And they also might be sent to the doctor. So if you have a seizure disorder, they might send to your neurologist a seizure questionnaire. You can advance now.
Is there any benefit to doing it online or doing it in person from what you've seen?
So for SSDI, you can do it online. For SSI, you have to actually call them and make an appointment, because that is not online. After the initial application, you're going to get a written decision. And that decision right now, approval rates are about 37% for last year. So most people get denied. A lot of people get denied. And some of it is the sloppiness of Social Security. Oftentimes, they'll put out letters to the doctors to try to get medical records. If they get nothing back, they just deny the claim. They don't really make much effort. So if you get a letter from Social Security that says, we've been trying to get your medical records from this and this and this source, you should call and follow up with a source to try to get them to Social Security. Next.
So what's your best advice to maybe get approved your first time through? Just being thorough and making sure you have all the information.
That you respond to the adjudicator who's handling your claim. They're really just an administrative person, and they are the ones that are shepherding it through the system. But you just need to make sure that you have that they have medical records, and they're not making decisions based on no medical records. Okay.
I've often wondered, because we have some people that sometimes have to jump around or they go from one doctor to another. And I've often wondered if it's been detrimental to them that they don't have a good stream of history with one doctor that really has their whole.
Well, if it's the wrong doctor, it's better to get rid of them. And that's a problem. I mean, there's certain acceptable medical sources. Maybe they get a lot of relief. I have a back person who gets a lot of relief from a chiropractor, but a chiropractor is not an acceptable medical source. Right. So if you're going to that doctor and that's the only person you're going to, you're going to get denied. Unless
we also have the problem where you may stop going to a doctor because you're not getting help. So they stop, and now you don't have that history.
And right now, if you have some mental impairments, and almost everybody gets at least depressed going through the disability process. It's a really hard thing. So if your doctor says, do you want to talk to somebody? You say yes. But right now, the waiting lists for some mental health treatment can be months or, a lot. And if you're with a certain kind of Medicaid, they may or may not help you get to the right person. So it's important to try to get whatever you need. If you need mental health treatment, ask for referrals. If you need physical therapy, ask for referrals, because those are the things that are going to support your claim. So so many people get denied. The denial does not really reflect that much on your claim. So it's better to go ahead and do the appeal. Again, you're only going to, about 37% of those who do the reconsideration are going to get approved. But it flips at the hearing level. So that's why you want to get to the hearing level, because a lot more are going to be found disabled at the hearing level than any other place. And that is also where you might want to get a lawyer. Okay, because it's a legal process and you're going to do better with somebody who understands the process. So advance. Again, this is the time to find an attorney. So we were getting like 35% at initial and a 35% at recon. Here you have about a 45% chance of approval, but it's better with an attorney, because a lot of people just get denied for the very same reasons that they got denied at initial and recon that don't have attorneys. Okay. Advance. So best to apply when you can no longer work at that substantial gainful activity of 1310 this year. If you apply too early, you'll just be denied due to earnings. If you apply too late, you may not have enough recent work activity to get SSDI and may be limited to SSI only. If you lose but continue to get sicker, reapply. There is no penalty for having lost. The only penalty is that you can't apply for benefits with a date that's before you lost in front of a judge. It's called res judicata. So if I lost my claim in 2015 and I went in front of a judge and he issued a decision, and then I'm getting sicker and sicker, and in 2018 I want to apply again, you can apply, but you can't go back before the 2015 date. Okay, advance. So what helps? A physician who knows you, who is going to give SSA a good evaluation of what you can do and what you can't do. Remember that that functioning is, we're talking both physically and mentally able to do these things. And there's a form which I have identified here, and I have a link to later, but it's a form that identifies the factors that Social Security is looking at when they try to determine whether you can work at steps 4 and 5. And there's a physical one and a mental one. Okay. Remember, this is where you want an attorney. Attorneys gather the information, they write a brief, they go to the hearing with you, they help you prepare for the hearing, and they help the judge understand how what's going on with you fits into the criteria for Social Security disability. Advance. So work incentives. Remember we were talking about that red book? Okay. So it's hard. Service providers can give you really bad information. Okay, so you want to make sure that you understand how working is going to affect your benefit. If you work, you can either maintain benefits for a period of time, or maintain some of your benefits for SSI, or almost always increases your monthly income if you work and are on benefits. If you work and earn enough to leave SSA roles but later need to return, there is a quick application process that may get benefits started within a few weeks, although it's not always easy to convince them of that.
I'm not sure, at least, who a service provider is. What do you mean by that? When you say service advisor,
Social Security people,
okay.
Social Security office. They have community work incentive coordinators. They're the ones you want to talk to.
Okay, so it should not be, okay.
Yeah, because they'll give you wrong information. They won't have any responsibility, you know, you can't sue them for giving you wrong information. It's hard often to prove that they gave you wrong information. So you want to be careful about whose information you take.
So if you're working, if you want to work, you should be looking for this community work incentive
coordinator. Yeah. And they'll tell you how exactly your work is going to impact your benefits. Again, you may be able to keep your health insurance for a time if you work. Remember, working is going to increase your income, so it's going to affect the other state benefits that you're going to be eligible for that Marina is going to talk about later, okay? And students can often earn money without impacting their SSI benefits too. So there are some special programs that are in place to help advance. And SSA may allow you to set some of your income aside for school or another vocational goal. That's called a PASS plan. And there's somebody at Social Security that actually monitors those and explains them to you. Remember, state benefits are going to be affected, even food stamps, by employment. Subsidized housing share is going to be increased for the time that you work. And the really kind of awful part about Social Security is you could work for 10 years and they never picked up on it or never did anything about it, even if you sent in your paychecks. And then all of a sudden they find you and they go back 10 years and charge you with huge overpayments. So remember to always work with that community work incentives coordinator. In city of Chicago, it's the mayor's office for people with disabilities. But one of the things that is going to be really important is for you to prove that you submitted your pay stubs timely in order to get out of that overpayment. Okay, next, sorry. Okay, so SSI for children is for people under the age of 18. They can only get SSI, and they must meet the financial requirements that we talked about before, the income and resource limits, and they must meet the disability standard for children, a different standard. Okay. So a parent has a child who's disabled. The child is evaluated based on the income of the parent and the child, that deeming process. So if I make $1,000 a month, and and my child is disabled but gets no other income, then about $200 of my income is going to be deemed to the child, and the child is going to get about $200 less a month than the full $794. Okay. Advance. It's complicated. So remember, any of the income and the resources can be deemed against the child. They're going to look at a child who can have 2,000. The couple family can have 3,000, so that the family, the three people together, can't have more than $5,000 in assets. Okay. Advance, yeah. So Mary makes $25,000 per year and has only one child and is not married. The income deemed to her child is $11,653. And that's because basically earnings are only counted at 50%. And there's a few other offsets. So she would look at 11,000 based, relative to 794. Obviously, the child's not going to be eligible for benefits. 1715, so the child will get 0. Okay. 1715 is around the break-even point. If you make 1750, it's going to be hard to get any benefit for your child. And so this is how it works. And I think I messed up the amount, but yeah, basically there's a disregard of $20 plus $65, and then you divide it by 2 and then compare it to.
I think it's funny when they have those little odd amounts there.
Oh, they're all silly. And
it's so confusing.
They haven't changed in 100 years, I don't think. I mean, it's
really
ridiculous. Well, since SSI came into being, which was in the 60s, they haven't changed. So, and including the resource limit. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do with the new Congress.
Oh, they're trying to increase the resource limit.
Right. And also at least peg it to cost of living increases, which it hasn't happened. So you just remember that if a child has some resources, then the parents are going to only be able to have less resources. So it's the total will have to be $5,000 or less. That's all that's important. And sometimes if you have 2 cars in a family, that will be counted as a resource. Okay.
Wow.
Unless you prove it's being used for work. Okay. So there's still a 5-step process, but really everything is kind of stops at step 3 for children. And this is there's something called functional equivalence. And what they do with children is look at 5 domains of functioning. And those who have marked limitations in 2 domains or extreme in 1 will be found disabled. Advance. So here are the functional domains: acquiring and using information. So that's really looking at academics, do you have learning disabilities? Do you have cognitive impairments of some sort? That will impact whether or not you have a marked or severe limitation in acquiring and using. Attending and completing, that's how well you pay attention. I have a child in him, and I am also ADHD. So if you have attention issues, that's where that's going to show up. Interacting and relating with others, that's going to be your behavior. Are you getting into fights? Or do you have a speech impairment that makes it hard for people to understand you? That's where that would show up. moving about and manipulating objects. People who have limbs missing need wheelchairs or a cane. Also, people who have weaknesses in their hands and can't hold pencils right. That's manipulating objects. So that's basically that domain. Caring for yourself. I like to think of this one as your ability to self-soothe yourself. Do you get angry and run out of the room and into the middle of the street? That's going to be somebody who has a marked impairment in caring for yourself. And the last one is health and physical well-being. And that's where you might see the seizure disorder or something like that.
So this one, I mean, most parents are going to look at this and go, yeah, my kids have problems with,
So
with all of this, but how marked, I mean.
Okay, so it's not going to be the parent who's going to be evaluating.
Right.
It's going to be the school. And what these are the basis of a teacher questionnaire. And Social Security usually just sends it automatically to school's teacher. But you also might want to get teachers who know your child better to fill one out. And that's usually what I do with people.
So if you have a child that has learning disability and they have also attention deficit, are you going to, I mean.
Well, it depends on how bad
disability?
it is.
Really?
It depends on how bad it is. I do get people on with those two impairments, but it just depends.
But their parents still have to be at a lower income.
Still have to be below income, right?
So, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Now we want able accounts. This is stuff we were.
Okay. So
it's helpful.
Remember that those resource limits are very stringent and count against you really quickly. So able accounts were started not that long ago as a way to help people who were found disabled before age 26 to put money aside that won't count against their resource limits. If you're over 26 or you have a lot of money to shelter, able accounts only shelter a certain amount, then you might want a special needs trust. And the last one is called a pool trust, which is a special kind of special needs trust. It's run by the state. So the special needs trusts generally need a lawyer to create a trust document. They can be pretty pricey, maybe like $5,000. Whereas a pool trust, the documents are already prepared, but you would have to pay a monthly fee.
How much is that fee usually?
It's based on the amount that you have in the trust. And the amount of services that you need to have, I think, too.
Okay.
So able accounts. These are tax advantage savings account for individuals with disabilities and their families. The funds are not countable resources for purposes of public benefits, which includes SSI, Medicaid, and SNAP. So you have to be found disabled before age 26, although stay tuned because that might be one of the things that change in this new Congress. There are some limits to the amount you can contribute annually and the total you can have in it. These restrictions are, there are restrictions on what you can spend the money on too. But they're easy to set up. You can set them up in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It's really easy. And there's a link in there to look into them. And if you have money left in that ABLE account and you die or something happens to you, then you have a beneficiary designated into it, just like you would in a special needs trust that it would get distributed to. Okay, advance. The special needs trust is a much more formal document. It's good for money that's either inherited or given to you. If the money's inherited, you can ask the person who's leaving the money to the child or the individual to leave it in to create a special needs trust to deposit that money into right away. Otherwise, if it actually gets into the hand of the individual, then they have to create their own special needs trust. So the difference is a third person special needs trust where somebody else creates the trust for the money, or a first person special needs trust where the individual creates the special needs trust for money that they already have. They require a private attorney to set up the paperwork, and they require a trustee who will file annual trust returns. They're expensive to create, and they are somewhat more bothersome to administer because you have to make sure you are following the rules for what that can be spent on. So, for instance, you can't spend money on a house or an apartment. Okay, it can't be for shelter. So you have to be a little bit careful about how you do that and what money you put into it. I've seen adult children maybe hit like 60 where their parents created just a regular trust fund for them, and they used up all that money, and they were 60 years old, and there was really nobody alive left to help them figure out how to stay in their house. So it's a really good vehicle if you're going to have a house and you're going to leave property, because they'll be able to maintain their SSI through their life. Next. That Illinois Pool Trust is a very special type of special needs trust, as I said. The minimums seem to have changed recently. There used to be like a $25,000 minimum, but I think that they don't do that anymore. You can talk to them. The people that run it are great. They'll give you all the information you need. And I gave a link to their website.
Do most states have something similar to this? Do you know, or
some do and some don't. There's also,
that's what they would call it. Most states, they would call it a pooled trust.
Okay. It's a state managed special needs trust. So pooled, they usually call it a pool trust, because everybody pools their money into the same account. And then you own a share of that account, basically. And they're good because you submit what you want to take the money out for, and they tell you whether you can do it. Now, the interesting thing about special needs trust, you could go to Las Vegas and lose the whole damn thing and they wouldn't care. But if you took out money and spent it for rent, then they would care. So it's the crazy part of life.
Huh.
Okay, so there's eligible and ineligible expenses. Okay. Advance. So here's a phone number. There's the link to applying for disability if it's SSDI. The residual forms are at that other link. And I think that's the last one, right?
Right. Well, so for ABLE accounts, I just wanted to understand that a little bit more.
Sure.
So for ABLE accounts, in case people don't understand, once you're on disability or whatever, you have to have, less than $2,000. So if you're over that, you want to do something with it, or SSI.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to, if you're over 2,000, you can put it into an ABLE account. Mm-hmm. So what are the restrictions on that? Do you know what, is there a maximum? Is it
it's I don't know, but it changes every year, but maybe it's about $16,000 a year you could put in there. And
16.
And you can maybe have up to maybe 200, I don't know, maybe 400,000. It changes all the time, but it's quite a large number you can have it up to.
And so somebody, if they wanted to give you money, they could also give you money. You can just put it in there, right?
As long as it's not over the limit for the year.
For the year. And what are the restrictions on it then? What can you spend it on?
It gives it to you in that website, but there are eligible and ineligible things you can spend them. Oh no, that's actually, there might not be. May not matter so much for ABLE accounts.
And I think like Laura Didier, I think you're on here, Laura and Allie, I don't know if you can hear me, but this is I think you maybe set one of those up. I don't know if you want to share anything on that.
Yeah, this is Laura. They're pretty generous with what you can spend the money on. There's not a whole lot of restrictions. For instance, I think Allie just recently used some of it for her schooling.
Right.
Which actually you can roll over a college fund, a 529, into an ABLE account, which is what we did, and that worked out really well.
Right.
And there's no penalty or anything like that. As far as I can see, it's pretty easy to use, and you have to keep your own records though. They're not going to keep the records for you as to what you're using the funds for. It's just that if they come after you, then you have to show what you've spent the money on.
Correct.
And there's not a lot of restrictions.
And that's going to be, no, there's not a lot of restrictions, and that's going to be true of any of these accounts. And if you take it out for something that you're not eligible for, I know the 529 plans, if you take it out of there and it's an ineligible expense, then you only, you just pay the taxes on it. So it's not really huge.
The other thing that we found that was really helpful is that there's that income level or amount that you can put in every year, which
Every
is
year.
$15,000 or $16,000.
Right.
If you're working, at least here in the state of Illinois, they have recently allowed you to add an additional, I think it's additional 12,000 of working income that you can add to it that isn't included in the $16,000 limit. So that's really good.
And the interesting thing about these ABLE accounts is you can join an ABLE account anywhere.
Right.
So even if your state doesn't have an ABLE account, you can go somewhere else and get an ABLE account. Or if you don't like your states, you can go somewhere else, because some of the states are less generous than others.
So where do you go? Do you go to a bank or?
No, you go to the ABLE, they'll tell you how to do it.
Just go to the website,
right
they'll
to
tell you how
that
to do it.
website, and they'll actually, the organization is great. It's so easy to sign up. But
It's really helpful to get on their mailing list or whatever, because they send out information, like I swear every week, about a new webinar that's about this topic and that topic and whatever. And they're just really helpful as far as education goes, to get you to understand how it's used.
And I want to say there's proposed legislation to increase that age from 26 to 46. So that's a good thing to sort of I just think legislation in all these areas is going to be changing. So it's good to keep your eye on what's happening.
So this is a no-brainer that people should set this up if you're receiving these benefits, if you're on disability.
And the states, there's another thing, the states can set the limit that you can put in the account, and some are as low as 235,000 and some are as high as 529. So you just need to kind of figure out which one you want to join.
Wow. So sometimes I wonder if you'll even need a special needs trust unless you're somebody that's got a lot of money to leave.
Well, let's say you have a child who's disabled and you live in a house that's worth $650,000 and you die. What's going to happen to the proceeds from that house?
This is true. I always forget about the houses.
Yeah. So, and that's usually, and that's when you can create the special needs trust. You could do that right with your will and pour over the assets that are in excess into that special needs trust. Okay. So you would get the special needs trust set up when you do your will, but you wouldn't fund it until you die. And I'll tell you, I know a little bit, and I'm probably dangerous, but I'm also a CPA. so that's why I know a little bit about these things that probably I shouldn't talk about too much. But basically, you have to think about all these things in concert, right? Because when you die, if your child was found disabled before age 22, then they're going to get benefits back they're going to get your income. So they're probably not going to be on SSI anymore, but you're still going to want them protected for other benefits like housing or food stamps or other things that they might need. You still want, well, they won't get food stamps either, but housing and that kind of stuff. If they need supported housing or anything like that, it will be helpful to have these ABLE accounts or special needs trust. One other thing that happened to you, Diana, I was thinking about, when you applied for disability, it was about 2 weeks after your daughter turned 20.
I think it was actually 6 months, but it was one of those, we went back to when she stopped working, but we could have gone further back because
you could always go back further. Yes.
Yeah, so we could have gone back further because she wasn't making that much anyway. She was working part-time.
So you want to make sure that if you have a child that this is going to be an important thing for, is to try to get them on benefits before age 22. And if you miss that 22, you want to prove that they were disabled before age 22. Right. And you can do that almost any time. So I did a 75-year-old man who got on SSI when it first happened, which was when he was in his 30s. He was mildly mentally impaired. It took a lot, but I got him on benefits back to age, to his father's benefits. I got him on his father's benefits.
All right, well, you and I can talk about that. Maybe you can help me
get
back 6 months.
I don't know. You have a finding of disability is why you're kind of messed up. And his was only for SSI, but maybe if you didn't apply for SSDI, then maybe we could do it.
Yeah, I'll talk to you about that later.
Okay. But
Does
so,
anybody, what? Go ahead.
so I have some questions here. Do you want me to start with questions, or does somebody want to ask a question? Just,
Let's see if somebody has any particular question, because I know it's a lot, and you know it's always very overwhelming. I know I've been dealing for a while, and I'm still overwhelmed. And I think a lot of the questions now will go to. I do want to say a lot of questions will be more about Medicare and Medicaid, and we'll cover that next Wednesday at 7 o'clock with Marina. But does anybody have a question other than the list that?
I have a question. This is
Okay.
Sabrina speaking.
Hi,
okay.
Sabrina.
My question is, I appealed my being dropped from disability, and I was just approved last month.
Mhm.
And I'm currently doing like odd jobs like babysitting.
Uh-huh.
Is that something that's considered will make me ineligible again because it's some work, but it's not?
So remember that number 1310. If you're
Mhm.
making more than $1,310 a month, and you're really required to report any income to Social Security each month, right?
Right.
And you're not showing a pay stub because they're not withholding anything, right?
Right.
So in a sense, you're kind of self-employed. So you should probably talk to me separately. But if you're making less than $1310 a month, you can turn in your income and it won't, it shouldn't affect your benefits. But if you work month after month, sometimes they try to kick you off because they'll say,
Oh.
why can't you work more? You know, that because there's mean people at Social Security too. So you want to kind of try to kind of think about it. So you got a continuing disability review, but they approved you, right?
Yeah, well, I was I don't know why they dropped me after I graduated college in 2019,
Uh-huh.
but I appealed that, and it took until this year in January
Yeah.
for them to approve it.
Okay.
So
So if you get a notice that says cessation at the top of it, which is probably what you got,
mhm.
you have 10 days to appeal that, and they'll keep your benefits going while they make all those decisions. So if you think you're going to qualify, you should do that.
Okay.
Okay. So if they do that again to you and you see that you get that cessation notice, call them right away and appeal right away, but you have to talk to somebody at Social Security and get them to allow you to continue benefits. You have to actually ask for it. There's a statement they're going to make you sign. If you try to just appeal online, you will lose your benefits while they make their
Okay.
decision. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
There's a couple questions in the chat there. Do you see them?
Oh,
They want to know what to do if you've been previously rejected, which I think you talked about.
so if you've been rejected, reapply. It doesn't matter. There's no penalty for reapplying. And if you were rejected, it depends. If you were rejected within the last 60 days, then you should appeal. Don't just keep filing applications. Do the appeal process because that's the way you're going to win. Okay.
And then there was, what do you do if you're going to a different state for SSDI?
So SSDI is a federal program. It'll go with you. You just need to, but your state benefits won't. So you'll want to register wherever you go. With Social Security, you want to make sure they have your right address, because remember, if you get that notice like cessation or something else, or they want to contact you, if they don't have the correct address, then they'll just dump you until you get in touch with them. So make sure you always change your address with Social Security. Your mother can set up a special needs trust with her will for you. Yes, she can. What she would do, that would be a third-party trust. She could go to an attorney. If you need recommendations, maybe what I'll do is leave recommendations for attorneys that do this kind of work with Diana. And also I will send you an attorney referral list if you need attorneys to.
And are most of your attorneys in the Chicago, Illinois area, or what would you suggest for people in other states if they wanted to find a reputable attorney? We talked about before we started that you found some attorneys aren't exactly on the up and up.
There's an organization called NOSCR, NOSSCR, National Organization of Social Security Claimants Representatives. but it goes by NOSCR at noscr.org. And they have a referral service.
Okay.
Until June 30, you can call me though. I might be able
Okay,
to.
yeah, Ellyce is retiring. Also, I don't know if anybody, I don't see anybody having this question, but you know, one of my questions would be, well, how much does an attorney cost?
Oh, it's the same
What
for
do we-
every single attorney, basically. That the basic fee is 25% of back benefits, but not more than $6,000. There are people who do a lot more work who might charge you more, somewhat, and some of those are the good attorneys and some of them are the bad attorneys. So you kind of have to know whether somebody is doing it just to get, but they have to have one in order to get any fee. Just say that. Okay.
Okay, so just, you can take that chance. There was this other question.
What happens if your child doesn't qualify for disability benefits because the parent makes too much money, even until the child is 22? So at 18, the child's an adult and the parent's income no longer counts against them. So you can apply then. So you wait until they've turned 18. Okay.
There's another question I think we missed. Where do you need to send in your paychecks? And we were told, because they were told not to.
Okay, so there's actually an app, I believe. So you want to talk to your local Social Security office. This right now, it's really neat because if you look online at Office Locator SSA or Social Security Office Locator, and you put in your zip code, it'll give you the inside number to the Social Security office. You have to wait through some messages, but eventually you'll get to an operator and you can ask them how to get the pay stubs to that office. Every office is going to be a little different.
I must admit, my daughter, I think, was doing the app. I'm not sure if she's still doing the app. I think she is, but a lot of times it wasn't working. And then we used to get statements, and I think she's still doing it, but she doesn't get statements anymore. So we don't know if it's going up into the ether.
And so, and that's why this number is really great, because somebody answers that phone every day. And you might have to wait a while because they have several people answering, but they could have a large volume. So don't call near the first or the last of the month, and don't call on a Monday. But other than that, you just wait through the system and somebody will answer and you'll say, you know, I've been sending in my pay stubs. I just want to make sure somebody is getting them. And that's also when you might want to work with that, the CWIC, the Work Incentives Coordinator.
I have a question about working. So if you're on disability and you're working, I mean, you're working part-time, like Sabrina's working, and my daughter works, and you're working part-time. I know for a while, and then maybe it was you that gave me this advice, I can't remember. We would track, you know, why there were days she couldn't work and, you know, there was pain issues and things like that. So we were tracking that because I think, what if you're working and they say, well, you're working, even though it's part-time, so you can work more. Is it a good idea? You know, to track that a little bit?
Well, one thing about working is sick pay, vacation, and holiday pay is not work money. So you want to be able to take that away from the pay stub too. So if you're getting holiday pay or anything like that, that's not considered work. So that can reduce your income in terms of being an offset against that 1310. But yes, I think it's always a good idea if you have symptoms that are significant enough that they frequently keep you from work, and you track it. I don't know if you need to do it all the time, but maybe you do it a month a year, or you do it if the CDR comes up, you want to start doing it right then, so that you have something to show them that you don't get, you know, $20 an hour 5 days a week, you know, every single week. That maybe
you could be.
Yeah,
because I think it was either you or somebody Social Security. I can't remember. It was so long ago that said track if you're going to work part-time, try and track, you know, why you didn't, you know, still
right.
Track some of the obstacles that came up. You know, you didn't work today because you were in pain.
And,
you know.
So the more, and things that you calendar are really important, because usually you create a calendar, and I would do it in handwriting actually. That's you know, something that you do at the time it happens. You don't go back and make up stuff. But if you do it on the day it happens, it has a lot more weight with judges too than if you tried to explain that, you know, 3 days a week you have pain so that you can't go to work, or, you know, those kinds of things. If you actually say, well, Monday at 2 o'clock, the pain was so bad I had to go home early. You know, those kinds of things are just much more persuasive. I use them with any kind of repetitive chronic conditions, say like asthma, where you get asthma attacks and you can't go into work, where you get seizure, where you have a seizure disorder. And sometimes people with a seizure disorder will have a cognitive impairment because they've had so many seizures. I make them write down their medicine so you can prove to the judge that you actually were taking the medicine and you were still having seizures. So things like that are important to calendar on an ongoing basis.
So now, once you have disability and you're on disability, it's not something, I think you kind of mentioned it briefly, but I wanted to go back to it. It's not something they can easily just take away, or they reestablish, you know, they're not always reestablishing it.
So it depends on when you get disability, they will put you on a schedule for reviews, okay? What happens is if they feel like it's something that it's only going to get worse, they might put you on a 7-year review cycle, and somebody at a desk somewhere will review your eligibility. If they think that you might get better, you'll have something less than 7 years. They can actually ask you to be reviewed as soon as a year if they want to. And so when they do that review, you're going to get that. If they think you can work, you're going to get that cessation notice, and that's when you're going to go in and appeal.
Okay.
If you think that they are wrong. If you think they are right, you may not want to do it. I will say this: if you are later found not disabled and you were on a continuing disability review, they're going to go back to that date when they thought you could no longer work and count all of that as overpayment. Okay. The one thing about overpayments, there's no interest on them. So, you know, if you don't have any other income, it might be better to have a no interest loan than to, you know, that's a personal preference, but I will just say that. Okay.
So I would assume normally with something like NF, that's more progressive, so
Yeah.
probably not going, but maybe something like cancer that you've recovered. Or, really quick, and I know Laura has a question I want you to get to, but really quick, I wanted to say before I forget, because this wasn't mentioned, and I don't know what, it's probably not under your priority or whatever, but my daughter actually, you know, had a little bit of student loans, and she was able to get those forgiven. So when you're on disability,
not always. So
she did, okay. But I know there was a process.
Yeah, but you have to actually have that 7-year review time. It's called a permanent disability.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. I think she got the permanent, and then she had the federal, and it was federal loans. So.
Yeah.
All right, Laura's got a question.
If your child is receiving SSDI and then her parent retires, do they qualify for 50% of the parent's Social Security benefit? Well, there's something called a family maximum. So it's going to depend on what the family maximum is for the worker. If you make a lot of money, she should qualify for 50% of the parent's Social Security benefit initially. And then when that parent stops drawing because they die or whatever, then she would get their full benefit. But if the parent is married and somebody else, there are other people drawing on that earnings record, it depends on how many people are drawing on an earnings record.
Thank you.
And if you just have a low disability income, if it's say under $700 or $800, the family maximum might mean that there's no money left over for the child.
Thank you.
So one of the things we talked about earlier too, I think this question didn't come up, but I think it's a good question that I asked you earlier, is if you have a child, like an adult child on disability, should you claim them as a dependent or not on your taxes?
So the rules for claiming a person as a dependent and the rules for Social Security are a little bit different at odds, you know. So you probably need to get a tax person involved a little bit. That might be the smartest thing. But as long as you are spending more on that child than the child's benefits are, according to IRS, then you should be able to deduct them. But remember, if you deduct them, there's all kinds of issues now about whether or not they're going to be eligible for like a Medicare savings program or other kinds of benefits that are tied to income. So you just have to kind of think about all the repercussions. If your child is on your tax return, her medical insurance is going to be evaluated with yours. So she's not going to be eligible for Medicaid, for instance, where she would be if she was on her own tax return as her, and claimed herself as her own dependent. So there's things to think about that can be problematic. If she's on, I think that's the basic one, though. One of the other things that we talked about was whether you should charge rent to your child if they're on SSI. If you have a child on SSI, you should charge rent, at least a third of the benefit amount. And there's a rule in Illinois that allows you to just charge that 1/3 and have that count as rent, even though the Social Security worker is going to ask you all kinds of questions about whether or not the value of that room is really more or less than $300 or whatever you charge. So that's a really important rule. I could try to send that to you too.
So as I'm always still trying to wrap my head around this and helping other people wrap my head around this, I think it sounds to me that a lot of times it's to your benefit to make sure you treat your adult child as they're not dependent on you. They have to pay
household.
rent,
Separate house.
Yeah, like they're a separate household. I think it's important. I've learned personal lessons with that. Over time, even my son, before he was 21, got into a work program that cost money, and they said, "Oh, it's free if they have even a learning disability." And they said, "We need your 1040," and I'm like, "Well, no, we're not gonna be eligible." And they said, "Oh no, because he's over 18, he's still considered a separate household, even though we need your 1040 and all that." So
it just depends on
like that.
The rules are for the program. There's one question I'd like to answer on the presentation, just because I think it's a little more sensitive, if that would be okay. The one about immigration. Somebody asked whether or not, if you are undocumented, would these benefits be available to you? And currently, they would not be. There might be some states, there are about 26 states that do have some funding for undocumented people. Generally, though, it's healthcare. You would be, there are a few benefits that you would be, and I put it on that question and answer sheet, but emergency Medicaid and access to treatment in a hospital in emergency rooms, but and WIC, which is Women's Infants and Children's benefits. But remember that even legal immigrants have some restrictions on what they can apply for and when they can apply for. So that's really important to know about and watch out for, because sometimes just applying for benefits can disqualify you in the future.
Okay, well, I think we have, why don't we take,
There's one more,
Sabrina's-
Sabrina's.
and then we can.
I'm on my mother's medical insurance through her job because she claims me as a dependent. Will that end if and when I get approved for SSI? It doesn't have to end, but you'll have trouble getting Medicaid until you're off her insurance. I think that's basically what happens there. Yeah, I mean, I think, like Diana was saying, you got to weigh the costs and the benefits to all of this stuff. And if you or your mom want to call and talk to me about it, I'm glad to talk about it. But it's not a yes/no answer. This is all shades of gray, unfortunately.
It's always shades of gray. And tie-dye, because it's so confusing.
Exactly. Yeah, well, different shades of gray, right?
Yeah.
There's a little color in our society. Anyhow.
All right. Well, we went way over. I did want to thank you, Ellyce, for doing this. And Ellyce said she could, answer any questions. I think can we provide your email address, or what would be the best thing to do?
So my email address is Ellyce, ELLYCE at legal counsel, legalcouncil.org. And I'll give you my phone number is 773-919-1611.
Nine, I'm trying to type it in. I don't even know if I typed the email right. Ellyce
Yeah,
at
you
Legal
did it.
Counsel.
Perfect.
Did I?
Mhm.
All right, I didn't get the phone number.
You want the phone number? 773
Okay.
919 1611.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
glad to-
And Ellyce did say she fields questions from all over the country. So
Yeah.
Wow.
And if I don't know the answer to the right question, I will refer you to somebody who can help you.
okay, well, next week, so next week at 7 o'clock, it'll be Marina talking more about Medicare and Medicaid, which just is still a part of this whole messy soup of things.
Absolutely.
And I think she's going to try and talk about other assistance and maybe a little bit of ICA and insurance. It's hard to squeeze all this in an hour.
And anybody who was worried about long-term disability, I did answer that in that outline about what happens to you if you have long-term disability from an employer's plan. There's a set off for Social Security, but that's, yeah. But it's important to know it's based on how the policy is written, and even private policies that generally have a set off for Social Security because that's how they price them.
Okay. Well, like we said, so at least answer those questions ahead of time that came in through registration, just in case we didn't get to them. And we put that in the chat too. So we'll try and send that to everybody too later. All right. Is that it? Is everybody good?
Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Ellyce.
Thank you so
for
much.
coming.
Okay, anytime. It was
We
fun.
appreciate it.
It was fun.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Denise, for captioning.
Yeah, thank
hopefully
you.
somebody used that. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.